Thank you very much for all being here. A lot of familiar faces, very nice. Yeah, today is the second webinar of the ResiRiver project. We already had one webinar, and you can see that on YouTube. And if you do like and subscribe that video. Yeah, my name is Lodewijk Schulte, and I'm a researcher at the Han University. Yeah, and this webinar is the second webinar of the ResiRiver project, and I think a lot of people know that already, but it will also be put online. So the ResiRiver project is an European Interreg project which focuses on upscaling and mainstreaming nature-based solutions. And we have 8 pilot studies where we investigate everything there is to know about these nature-based solutions. And in this webinar, we'll focus on the 2 pilot studies who are in the estuarine systems, and we'll focus on the challenges and a lot more, but we will come to that back later. And this webinar is in the context of Work Package 2, and Work Package 2 is all about learning and the knowledge materials to get all the information that the organizations need to implement the nature-based solutions. So we have one presentation from Melanie Schultz from WSV about the Bunker Bay, and one from Umi Polman from Rijkswaterstaat. And after these presentations, we have quite some time for a very good long discussion. Some practical aspects. We will record this webinar, as he is already recording. So thank you, Nienke. And we would like to ask you for the first part of the presentations to turn your camera off. That makes it a bit easier for us to do the editing and etc. And after every presentation, we have some time for questions. So you can put them in the chat or just raise your hand, and then of course you can put your camera on. And for the second part, the discussion, then we would really like to invite you to turn the camera on, because then we can involve everyone and have a nice, good discussion. And we would really like to use your knowledge and thoughts on the themes and on the topics. Yeah, I'm usually quite on time, so when during the questions I will break in if it goes over the time. So please, forgive me for that, but I think we will be fine. With that said, so for this part, please turn your camera off, and then during the discussion, you can put your camera back on if you want to. Melanie, can I invite you to start with the presentation?
Yes, of course. So welcome everybody. Sorry for the delay. I'm going to speak about the challenges of Bunker Bay today for the purpose of this webinar. I don't think I need to reintroduce the pilot site as a whole too much, because we've spoken extensively about Bunker Bay in various other talks. So I guess you're familiar with the view already. We have one main goal for Bunker Bay, which is reducing hydraulic pressure on the shoreline to avoid the restoration of the revetment cover and also help biodiversity. So the bay lies somewhat protected or elevated from the main channel. So we had the idea of reducing pressure through softer means, so to speak, by increasing sedimentation and gaining vegetation. But as is the whole point of, or the whole theme of today's webinar, we have a tidal environment at this location. So the Bunker Bay lies on Weser kilometer 27.5 to 28.5 away from the North Sea. which means that it is still influenced by the tides twice a day. The water level is measured at Fage, which is the district right next to it. And so we have an average high tide of 2.2 meters and an average low tide of 1.6 meters, which gives us a total average tidal range of 3.9 meters, which is one of the highest that we have in Germany. A lot of revetment covers in this area were built after the Weser deepenings throughout the 70s and 80s. This, of course, increased the influence of the tides and the pressure on the shore through this sort of funnel effect that you get. We also have strong winds from the northwest during storms, which also increase this influence, and storm surges are especially dangerous when there's no firm revetment cover. In the WSV, we do have great software that I learned about. It's called GBB Soft Plus, and it can be used to calculate ship-induced loads and the dimensions for bank protection, which are accordingly needed. So it is possible to design both technical revetment and technical biological bank protection with this software. A challenge that we do have is that this is not yet available for tidal environments. So speaking to my colleagues, one of the takeaways is definitely that we just have to accept that there are certain limitations to the effectiveness of NBS only after a certain water depth is reached, or if the tidal range is as great as it is at Bunker Bay. So usually more space is needed than we have. You know, on the opposite side of Bunker Bay, on the left shore, there is a lot of sand and also some shore loss, but there's capacity for these losses because you have more space. And if the bank has to be as steep due to space issues, then there's not a lot of options. So space can also not be created at Bunker Bay. The dam behind it cannot be relocated or just at very high cost. And the security of the dam has utmost priority. In inland waterways, for example, willow spread would be a classic nature-based solution, but that also has critical growth phases and could be potentially destroyed by the tides before it latches, so to speak. Bush boxes that now catch silt in Bunker Bay in the tidal environment, they are now high enough to not be in that much danger, but it's not like at the coast where you can use them for like actual land gain. And in the inland waterways, it's considered to be more of a wave breaker or disturbance body. Then you might remember a tree I previously told you about that we wanted to fell and use as a deadwood structure in the bay, which we were not allowed to do after all, as it was discovered to be an endangered species. We still want to do the measure and substitute with a different tree. Implementing it from somewhere else might be tricky though, because of short flooding periods in the bay. But it will probably be made possible from land with a cable winch. So I also asked about shipping traffic. And shipping traffic at Bunker Bay has decreased in total numbers, but the ships that go past are larger and faster now, which are the more important parameters to look at when you're looking at suck and surge effects of the water. I was told that the most harmful boats, so to speak, were tugboats and custom ships, which due to their design just make the largest waves. Also, there's no speed limit at Bunker Bay area. So larger speeds are reached after 4 p.m. and on the weekends. People are apparently flooring it to get home. And the largest ships that are allowed at this point of the river are 14,000 container units. I didn't really know what to make of this. but these are very large ships, and I guess to some more experienced people, this draws quite the picture. So we also spoke about maintenance budgets for our waterways. This is discussed yearly, and special financial needs and inflation need to be considered and added beforehand. So from what I've heard, there's not really a problem with the inclusion of NBS measures in the budget plans. There's a certain flexibility within the hierarchy structures of our branch office and then the local office that belongs to them. It's impossible again to express like the inner workings of WSV in English terminology, but they do have some kind of agreements between themselves. So if the local office for some reason would be under-equipped, then we always have the opportunity to tender a measure, or planning might take place just at a higher level within WSV. Also, through projects like Blue Belt Germany, sometimes there's an opportunity to complete a measure within such a project. And then you would only have to specify whether the maintenance costs are proportionate in the afterlife, basically, of the NBS. But yeah, we still have the situation that the application should be mirrored in the regulation, which is not yet the case. So NBS is at every level still considered more an add-on as opposed to business as usual. This is also reflected in one administrative regulation that we have. For example, certain documentation is required, or plans are required only after a certain budget has been determined. And for ecological development, this threshold is 5,000 euros, whereas for other standard measures, grey measures, this documentation is only necessary from the threshold of 100,000 euros, which is quite the span and quite a jump. This regulation was recently reviewed, and this was not changed or considered, which is a bit of a shame. And we could always try to change things like this with a decree, but it really has to be wanted, and creating comparability between grey and green measures throughout all of these regulations really is and will be a lot of work. We also have the issue that economic viability must be indicated, which can be tricky with ecological projects. So the question is what could be done, and it would be helpful, of course, if it was easier to calculate ecosystem benefits and also price in the ecological footprint of larger grey measures. Because in the end, of course, it's cheaper to just put stones, but if you have to import the stones, for example, from a different country, then it might not be more economically sensible to use this then instead of willow spreads, for example, which can be gained from local production. So regulation-wise, of course, as all European countries, we have to adhere to the Water Framework Directive and national nature conservation law. And we also almost always have to get the okay from the lower nature conservation authority. They call the shots and give permission or not. What seems to be key is just early conversation with everybody. Also, compensation needs to be considered always, but the replacement areas you get also need time and sometimes years to reach the ecological value of the area that they are compensating. So you might have a lot of players in the field, local authorities, federal authorities, landowners, or rangers. So what I was told is that sometimes it can be easier to switch locations. There might be similar locations nearby, which can be easier than to achieve unanimity between all of these parties. Also, when you're looking at, you know, time invested and financial capacities of these processes. Excuse me. I consider this more of a stakeholder problem than a regulations problem. But yeah, we're happy to hear from our partners what they think about this. Lastly, speaking about our successes, of course, we have the one implemented measure to show for, which works as intended. So you can see here the photos again of when we built the new bush box and restored the old one almost exactly 1 year ago. And these are pictures that my colleague Michaela took in May of 2024, which already shows that sedimentation has increased. Of course, it's not fair to compare vegetation from December to one in May, but we can also see vegetation spread. And these are pictures that I took in October, which also shows that the bush boxes are doing the job and that siltation has increased quite a bit. Future changes will be monitored by my colleague Jennifer. And yeah, I want to thank her and my colleagues Michaela Dumm, Sven Bennekamp and Katrin Heinzner for helping me prepare this talk. And we are happy to receive your questions. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, nice, Geert.
If you don't mind, I'll just jump in. All right. I'm Dave Crane. I'm with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, United States of America, serving as a associated partner representative on ResiRiver. So I'm a little curious about the bureaucratic hurdles that you mentioned regarding there being a lower threshold to trigger additional documentation or permitting for ecological measures versus standard grade measures. I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit more about that. That seemed kind of interesting. I'd like to see what kind of parallels I could try to identify for projects that I work on. So is it more like measure comparison disclosures or documenting, or is it more related to permitting? I guess I'm curious as to how that works out and what the ramifications are in your planning and design process.
Yes, thank you very much for this question. I don't know if Jennifer or Michaela want to jump into this with me, because I'm certainly not the expert. But as I understood it, it's both a permit and yeah, what's the word? It's a permission thing, but also then like a assessment thing. So just the required documentation is much larger compared to or from a very small amount of money onwards than for the gray measures. I can maybe share. Oh, wait a second. It's a little. Sorry, can you see this? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this was the measure I was talking about, 78005, where you can see it's like 5,000 euros for, well, it's in German, but ecological development. And then, yeah, you have all the documentation or permission offices, I guess, that need to be involved. And in comparison, I mean, there are like a million different measures that can be taken, but in comparison, it's just way larger. I wish I could elaborate a little more in detail. Maybe someone else wants to add something to this, but this is all I have now.
I get, and maybe a clarifying question: is it just that they're scrutinized more carefully? In order, is that really what it comes down to? Is scrutinizing doing things differently than the status quo? Is it?
Yeah.
Or is there? Is that?
I guess you could call it scrutiny, yeah, because if you have to account for every 5,000 euros you spend in comparison to only having to account for, you know, or yeah, six-figure investments, then I guess you could that falls under the umbrella of tighter scrutiny, yeah.
And is that just for things that you might be referring to as nature-based solutions that are working in concert with traditional infrastructure, or does that also include things that aren't providing ecosystem services like compensatory mitigation or other ecological features that might be added?
I don't know about specific other ecological features, but we do have some of these thresholds for other things that are needed to maintain sites. For example, if you want to build, for example, a road to reach somewhere, then they also have these like tighter budget regulations. But I'm not 100% sure about other ecological measures.
Thanks, Dave, for your question, and thanks, Melanie. I think now we will go on to Umi. So if you can present, please start.
So I'm focused today on the Rhine Meuse Estuary, and specifically the pilot location Kuipersphere. Here you can see a picture already of the location itself. And we're mainly focusing on a nature-based approach to stabilizing the riverbank. So I first wanted to zoom in a bit on where this is actually located. So in the right top corner, you can see the Rhine Meuse Estuary. We're focusing on this area at the programmatic approach to great waters, or as in Dutch, programmatische aanpak grote wateren, which is really working at sustaining and making the ecological functioning of the large waters in the Dutch Delta more resilient. And then in the middle part, you can see the exact location of Kuipersphere, which is located at the Oude Maas. And this river is also under the influence of tidal dynamics, although good to mention, a lot less so than Bunker Bay, among which because of the delta works. So I first want to take a quick look at what the current status of Kuipersphere. So it's a former industrial site, and afterwards it has kind of been neglected, so nature has gradually been allowed to develop. However, it really does not reflect the type of nature that would exist without human intervention within an estuary. So that's good to note. Currently, it's mostly flood-free grasslands, which is the light green, as you can see on the right corner, and brushwoods, which is also flood-free. And then there are some wetland areas that are also, they also dry up occasionally. So it's actually not under the influence at all right now of tidal dynamics or the river itself. Except the riverbank, which is something I will focus on later. It does, however, already hold some ecological value. So it's been found that due to an abundance of flowering plants, a lot of insects do use the area, and a variety of bird species as well as beavers visit the location. So we also want to see if we can sort of maintain the ecological value as well while designing it in a more nature-based approach. So one of the reasons my colleagues come here today chose this as a pilot location is because of erosion damage of the riverbank. And so there's a budget as well. The riverbank maintenance is programmed in the near future, around 2025 till 2030. But they also saw this as an opportunity to increase the ecological value of the riverbank, and maybe also other values we can discuss later. The picture shows a lot of different things, but I mainly want to highlight, you can see the red dotted line that goes straight down. That's a theoretical slope. It shows actually how the riverbank should be if it was for it to be stable. And then you can see way at the bottom, which the red dotted line, which is a prognosis for how it would look in 2031 if the erosive trend continues that is occurring right now. So for this, the challenges are mainly focused on technical and legislative issues, but if anyone has questions later for maintenance budgets, I think I'll direct you to my lovely colleagues who know more about that. So that's for them. So I first wanted to look into the picture. You can see the yellow area, which is the pilot location, Kuipersphere. And then you can also see a highlighted green area, which is a Natura 2000 protected area that's right next to it. And then behind Kuiper Sphere, there's also a flood defense system, so a dike, which is protecting the inner dike area. And there's a river with a blue line going through it, which shows the shipping channel. So there are many technical issues regarding space. First of all, there is quite a lack of space for wide bank design. It's quite a narrow river, and it is a higher proximity to the shipping channel. So if we want to create a more gentle slope or use vegetation in another way than just using a hard gray measure, we would need more space to create land inwards instead of towards the river. And then, as previously mentioned, there's an erosive trend, also because the specific location is sensitive to erosion. This is because it has influence of ship waves, as it's next to the shipping channel. And it also has sometimes high river discharges. It can have high river flow rates, and the direction of the flow rate changes because it's under the influence of tidal dynamics. Furthermore, it's also positioned at the outer bend of the river, which also sort of increases this erosive trend. We do see this, though, as an opportunity also to use a nature-based approach to see if we can enhance the ecological value while also aiding this erosion decline. And then lastly, this is also a legislative issue, as if Kuiper Sphere lies within the outer protection zone of the flood defense. The water board can also impose requirements on the design and future management of the bank. So we really need to take into account water safety in that sense as well. We are not as far yet as Banco B, because our program is right now more in the exploration phase. So if anyone has advice later, that's great. But we see several opportunities for nature-based approach to restore the riverbank. So first, which is important in our program, we want to increase the influence of tidal dynamics. So we really want to create time and space for these dynamic processes that are inherent to an estuary. And then we can also enhance this ecological value for the estuarine biodiversity. But we also see as a chance to increase water safety, like having a more gentle slope and also creating more openings for water to be let into the system. We can also create more space to discharge water during high flow events. Then next two are kind of connected. I see it as connected because we can enhance the ecological connectivity with Kuiper Sphere. So we really want to see if we could create a green-blue passage throughout the Oude Maas, particularly because there are a lot of Natura 2000 protected areas along the Oude Maas, and also one right next to ours, to our pilot location. So there is a potential to connect and add to the area, and also increase the diversity of habitat types. So sort of we should see we could contribute to their goals for certain species and habitat types. And then lastly, we also see an opportunity to maybe improve the water quality. Right between Kuiper Sphere, the pilot location, and the Natura 2000 protected area is a pumping station, which is pumping out nutrient-rich contaminated water. And we can also see that we could establish something of a reed bed to sequester nitrogen and biomass to enhance the water quality. I think this also would be beneficial if you want to connect the two areas, because you don't want a system in the middle there where the ecological and chemical water quality aren't up to par. And then we also have lessons learned. Currently, Rijkswater is also working with Proeftuin Sediment Rijnmond, which is a living lab for sediment management. And they're using sediment from dredging activities in the Rhine Meuse Estuary. And these dredging activities occur, and normally the actual sediment disappears into the sea or into the post, while it's actually usable and good quality sediment, so it really disappears from the system. And this living lab is looking, for example, filling erosion pit with the sediment and seeing how it re-enters the system again. And we also see this as an opportunity for our pilot to supplement the riverbank with sediment from these dredging activities within the Rhine Meuse Estuary, also as an opportunity so it can re-enter the system, allowing for more natural sediment dynamics, especially because erosive trends occur a lot throughout the Rhine Meuse Estuary. So that's what I want to say, and thank you for listening. If there's any questions, but also if there's any advice for concrete approach to actually achieve these goals, we are happy to hear it. We also have a question for discussion. I don't know if I should share that now or later. Lodewijk?
Yeah, please share.
Yeah. There's more also maybe a bit of a philosophical question from my colleague here, but so we, from the programmatic approach to great waters, aim to develop a resilient estuarine system in the Rhine Meuse Estuary. And we wanted to pose the question, to what extent do you consider nature-based solutions as truly restoring or mimicking natural systems, and how much of their implementation still relies on human engineering and control? Yeah, so this is a question that may evoke some thoughts, hopefully. Thank you for listening.
Geert, I see you have your raised hand.
We are here with a few Rijkswaterstaat colleagues enjoying this seminar, and I have a question about this last presentation. So you started by pointing out that the original area that we are now looking at is already in quite a good shape. So nature values are already there, and it's not too bad. So what is then the motivation in the first place to try to extend this by applying a nature-based solution? And how do you think that the audience will respond to that, given the fact that it's already in a good shape? Can you elaborate on that?
Sorry? Is this video? Oh, okay. Good. Well, the goal of the PRGW program, whom we explained in the beginning, is to create a resilient nature more on an estuarine typical habitat profile. And that's exactly what here in this location is missing. It's very terrestrial. There's no influence of tidal dynamics. And that's exactly what we want to give back to the big river system in that way. So that's the main goal of looking into possibilities and potentials of creating more estuary type habitats in this case.
Yeah, and I think also if you're looking at, for example, the goals from the Natura 2000 for the area, they look for specific habitat types that are influenced by tidal dynamics and the river. And so to really get to these goals, you cannot have just phosphate grasslands. It already has some value on its own. But for a lot of species, it is key that there's actually influence on these dynamics, and they are often now on red lists. So that's, I think, one of the reasons that we really want to change the type of environment.
Does that answer your question, Rolf?
Yes, thanks for the answer.
Okay.
And do we have someone else who want to give it a go on this question?
Yeah, I would also like to ask a question if someone else does not. I'm quite interested in the proximity of the Natura 2000 area to Kuipersveer, which, if I understand correctly from your presentation, Umi, you see as an opportunity in sort of facilitating the change for Kuipersveer. I'm curious if you also come across certain challenges because of the proximity of Natura 2000. For example, when we compare it to the example that Melanie gave of the felling of a tree, which turned out to be to have a protected status. Is there only benefits, or does it also complicate the Kuipersveer case?
Well, Kuipersveer itself isn't a Natura 2000 protected area, so I don't think it has the same guidelines. I do think if we do want to connect the two areas, yeah, it's difficult. I don't know how to say it quite well in English, but they have a sort of channel, like an opening for water within that system. And we also kind of want to see if we could maybe connect those two to create more dynamics. But if there's still, that pumping station, and because of changing the dynamic system, it also means that the ecological water quality becomes worsened. And I think probably there are quite some more harsh guidelines for how you want to do that if it's a Natura 2000 protected area. So I think if you want to connect the two, it could maybe have some challenges, but for Kuipersveer itself, I don't think it's not protected itself, so I don't think the same measures apply. But if you guys know more, then
no, this is good. At this point in this the phase of this project, we don't know exactly those kind of challenges occur, maybe, but maybe later on.
Okay, clear. Thanks.
Yeah, if there aren't any more questions, we will go on to the discussion part. Thank you, Umi, very much for the presentation. Yeah, now we come into the most fun part, the discussion. So if you want to, you can put your camera on. And then we will go through some topics. I will present some slides. Yeah, the first topic is about these challenges with conflicting legislative frameworks within the organizations. Melanie, you already talked a little bit about this. So I would also like to start with this first question about these conflicting frameworks and how it impacts the potential of nature-based solution to implement it. And also it's also a question for the other pilots. So if you're also facing these issues, please raise your hand and explain your thoughts on how you are dealing with this or how you are trying to cope with these conflicting frameworks. And if I don't hear anyone, I will start mentioning names. So yeah, Moritz, please.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, all right. I think the challenge Melanie described in WSV also extends to the legal duty we have, because there's a difference between maintenance for shipping and traffic and maintenance for ecological objectives. At least in WSV, there's a difference. Maintenance for traffic and shipping has a wider permission for measures, and if you have maintenance for ecological purposes, this is much stricter. And I think the only reason, or the main reason, is that WSV up to now missed sort of an update of or an update of the interpretation of the law in this case. So I think this has to be done in the future to allow WSV to act like similar in ecological terms when it comes to maintenance compared to the traditional maintenance. Thanks.
And where is the challenge then? Specifically, is it on how to organize this, or is it the available knowledge, or is it more just difficult to sort of transition to more of these ecological regulations?
I think it's because WSV is a traditional shipping agency, and the ecological tasks are like the newer ones. So the laws that like give us the task of maintenance for shipping is like we are used to do that, and the legislation for ecological purposes is newer, and so it needs to be I think we need some spirit to interpret the law in this case in terms of ecology, and to introduce it into this traditional traffic agency. I think that's the main point.
Yeah, clear.
So
Thanks.
if I may jump in, and so is this actually to say that if you would have to do maintenance for shipping and then you harm ecology, that is accepted, while if you do maintenance for ecology and you harm shipping, that is up to now not accepted? And do you then actually call for a kind of equality of those two goals?
That's a hard question, because the law says, because of the Water Framework Directive, we are not allowed to harm ecology when we have like maintenance for shipping. I don't know the term in English, but there's a law saying, oh no, you cannot you cannot harm the ecological status. But I think this is like more of a normal process for VSV, because if we have to build up a new infrastructure for shipping, yeah, we have to do this, and there's an economic interest or an economic purpose. And the other way around, like you asked, if you have to have measures for ecology, yeah, we are maybe very carefully and very carefully in making sure that this will not harm shipping goals. And you can be maybe sometimes you can be too carefully, right? And this takes a lot of time and raises a lot of questions and a lot of needs to measure and to have data and to analyze. And then you are like in consequence, you are very slow in having these measures.
Yeah. So I'm not really an expert on this field, but I can imagine that, well, perhaps legislation is not completely filled in order to tackle these kind of problems, and that in the end, the economic aspect will always prevail. Would you agree with that? And I'm not saying that is the right thing to do, but I guess nowadays that still is the case.
State is this one, yeah. Also.
Come again?
I guess you're probably right. If you look at us, if we from asset management for our banks, the primary focus is shipping.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have some other about these conflicting frameworks, maybe for Pim, Umi, and Loudens. In the Delta, a lot of functions are need to be served. Fresh water availability, salinization issues will be increasing problem in the future. I think it's I saw some plans for water availability that are thinking about building more dams, also in the Oude Maas or the Nieuw Waterweg to close it off. I'm sort of wondering how do you think that we can find a balance within, with all these functions in this delta to make sure nature is not the one below the list, sort of.
Shall I answer this question? This is a very general question, and if you're referring to some shit, sorry. If you look at our estuarium, we try to keep it an open, closable estuarium, and open is for shipping and also for tidal effects for nature. But we know that if we're looking at 1, 2, 3 meters of sea level rise, and then you should actually think about 2 meters sea level rise, it's getting more complicated and complicated. So if you, and then also looking at salt intrusion. If we want to have our shipping, our open harbor, if you want to have enough fresh water for agricultural and drinking water, we know a problem is coming ahead the next decades, and probably we can manage it the coming decades, but at the end of our century, this is getting worse. And if you and the fun part in this is maybe that shipping and nature are going together on this. Because an open harbor is good for shipping and is also good for tidal, having a tidal system. Because if you're looking also, if you're only looking at the fresh water supply, then the plants coming up at close to a new waterway, and we don't have any salt intrusion. And that only counts if you don't put a big sea sluice in it. But in that case, you have also your salt intrusion. So these are all very long-term elements. And actually, I think if we're looking at these long-term elements, the battle is more between freshwater supply and nature than between shipping and nature at this moment.
Thanks. Thanks, Pim. Then we will go to the next topic. Yeah, we also talked a little bit about these. What I was found quite interesting, Melanie and Mortens were talking about. So about these, permissions on measures for each ecological aspects of the 5,000 euros you talked about. Yeah, what does it need that will change? That will what kind of actions do you think could
So I mean, I touched on this briefly in my talk already, but my colleague Sven Wennekam, he mentioned while we were speaking about this webinar that he thinks the only way out really is to calculate the true cost of the gray measures, basically, and the true cost of the green measures to create some sort of comparability. But right now we're not looking at the entire way. Let me look up the word that I actually want to use. Like he said, if you have to import stuff, the value added chain. So if you have to import stuff from somewhere else to implement it, for example, that's not really considered what that does to the environment, perhaps, or like I said, the true impact of implementing one measure compared to the other one. And right now, there's just no way to calculate this in a reliable way, or have it implemented in or included in the regulations that we have to adhere to. So I think that was a good point to consider. And of course, this will be like an immense amount of work if we ever want to come to the point of considering this for every measure that is possible. But I guess, we better start now than later. So it is a lot of work, but I felt like his point was very good, that this might be maybe not the only way to improve the situation, but one of the ways.
Yeah. Thanks. Geert?
Melanie, if I may ask, so why do you think it's impossible to make that comparison between the true cost of engineering solutions and NBS?
I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's a lot of work that nobody has the capacity, or not nobody. I'm always in these like very definitive terms. I just think, it's a lot of work, and it will be there will be a lot of capacity needed time-wise and staff-wise to to compare this for all the measures we have to take along the waterways. If we want to have a true comparability between green and grey measures, it's just going to take a long time. And I feel like the calculations of, for example, ecosystem services, you know, that's an ongoing thing, I guess, that we have touched on multiple times already. It's just quite hard to quantify. And then, I think it's just going to be a lot of work.
I'm not certain of the. I mean, it might cost quite a lot of work. That's true, but perhaps you can come to a relatively simple framework that tries to compare the different aspects of those solutions. On the other hand, I then wonder if, for instance, if you do that and then the engineering solution comes out as best, would you then come to the decision to construct that engineering solution? Because then you are looking at all the different aspects, and then the sum might be in favor of the engineering solutions, but you still might not get to this biodiversity net gain, for instance.
Yeah.
So
right.
how do you balance then the decision? I think that's not a challenge.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I guess that's one of the things we're aiming for in ResiRiver, right? To convince people that money is not everything, and that even if the engineering solution is, you know, comes out on top in a comparison, even though some costs who have not been previously considered will be considered then, and even if the engineering solution is superior financially, then we still have to, you know, have those other aspects of, you know, longevity and the long living effects on the environment and human well-being and all these things. I guess on like a legal regulatory level, this is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And Umi, a question for you or for your table. What I think is always very interesting is indeed these different nature regulations, Natura 2000 or habitat types or vegetation types that are sometimes conflicting with a nature-based solution. That's sort of the one nature regulation prevents a nature-based solution sometimes. What are your thoughts on this, and do you think that is an issue in the Rhine Meuse Estuary, or and how to overcome this?
Well, it's my personal thought. In my opinion, current nature protection laws is very conservative. It really aims to protect existing current nature. On the other hand, we see in the estuary system, it's very dynamic. There is also some kind of circle of life within the dynamic of the nature. That means that protected habitats will die in some parts, and in other parts, new habitats will develop, born, and some kind of circle of life for habitats, in our opinion. On the other hand, we see these laws are very restrictive in conserving existing nature, and that feels some way a bit unnatural, if you understand. That gives us some tension in discussions we have. What do you aim for? What are the laws? On the other hand, how do you see the system functioning on a higher level? Yes, and that makes it sometimes very complex and difficult to most people. So that's my experience in my field currently.
Yeah, and for the other pilots, someone else, does someone experience these issues as well? Maybe in along the Rhone or in Ireland? Please.
I have an experience with another project where the nitrogen regulations are frustrating a project. So it's near Natura 2000 area where we want to make some water retention features with machines, of course, and the nitrogen emission of these machines are too high for the Natura 2000 area, and we don't get a permit. So it's not the same, but comparable.
Yeah, thanks. And I think these challenges will only increase in the in the coming years, especially in Netherlands, where everything is so compact and close to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually want to.
I have a question that is slightly related to this. So to both the pilots actually. I was wondering, does size matter? I mean, both for Bunker Bay and the pilot in the Rhine Meuse Estuary, the areas in itself are quite little, if I may say so. Is there also a discussion on whether to protect those smaller areas in favor of, for instance, bigger ones where you can have more effect by taking your measures? Is that discussion on the table in the first place or not? Is it just about the small pilots? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, I think so. I'll try to give an answer, but our pilot location is, in our view, one of many. We're looking for specific species for migrating fish that need to go from sea to upstream freshwater river systems. Now, Maas is in that case a very important connection between those two different habitats for the fish. But I think it's about, let's see, maybe 50, 60 kilometers from the one to the other. So we need to facilitate what we say stepping stones or areas for fish to migrate to further upstream in this case. And we think this location is one of many we need to improve from the system level the corridor function of the river branch in this case. So in that way, we hope we can upscale and mainstream this pilot experience in some way and project it to other locations in the future.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. No, small. Yeah.
Then we're almost at the end of the webinar. If there aren't any more questions, then I would thank you all very much, and we'll see each other on another webinar or somewhere in the field. Yeah.
Thank
Thanks.
you very much
you all.
for having us.
Thank you very much.